If you would like to know how decision making works, or choice if you want, that thing that determines the direction of your life, if you want the destiny of your life and what happens in your life, then stick around and I'll explain in as simple terms as I can understand it. Hi guys, my name is Jacques Snyman and I make videos to help you, stuck possibly in a 9-to-5 in the corporate, get out of there and create a more secure future for yourself and your family. The next couple of themes that I'm going to do in terms of videos, guys, is going to be about things that I can essentially talk about without even thinking about it, without doing an awful lot of prep. And I just wanted to connect with you guys and relate and see where this goes. So if you do find value in what I discuss, please like and subscribe or leave a comment. I'd really appreciate that because it'll help me shape the themes and the things that I talk about going into the future. All right, so how does decision making work and why is it important? Tony Robbins keeps hammering on this thing, and so does just about every other personal development or self-development guru out there. And they say that choice is among the most important things that we can understand and manage in life to improve life and to get better at things, right? So I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about how choice or decision making works in terms of me, you, an individual, in other words. And then I want to allude to another thing, which is really what is then the difference between individual decision making and group decision making. And I want to share that because most of you will be sitting in a business environment or a corporate environment. And the moment you have to make decisions as a group or as a team, then the dynamics change. And that process is even more complex than just the individual decision-making process. All right, so how does individual decision-making work and what impacts it? I want to touch on three things really. I want to just share with you how I understand the process of decision-making. And I've done loads of research. My master's thesis I did on the same theme as well. So the process of decision-making, I just want to quickly allude to that. Then there's two other things I'd like to talk to you about. And the one is the impact of our human needs as human beings, and how those things could impact your decision-making and your decision-making process and the kinds of decisions that you do make. That's the second thing I want to touch on. And then the third thing is this thing called the pain-pleasure principle. And I think it is important enough for us to understand that and understand how that, for example, relates back to beliefs, values, and principles and things like that, and how that then actually impacts our process as individuals in terms of decision making. Right, so get in your mind's eye the picture of an iceberg. If you can imagine an iceberg, I'm going to use that as an illustration to explain to you how individual decision making works, right? If you can think of an iceberg, what you can see above the water level is a very small amount or a very small percentage of that entire thing called the iceberg, right? Roughly 85 to 90%, if not more, of that iceberg sits below the water, right? So what do we typically see in terms of decisions or choices we make in our lives? We see you could argue the decisions that we make, right? The choices we make, and then we see what we do, in other words, the actions. And then we typically also see the consequences or the results or the outcomes of those decisions that we make, right? So those things are above the water. So for me, the water line is the metaphor for the point of choice, the point of decision, right? The moment of truth, if you want. So on the waterline, you make a decision, and what you see above the waterline is what you do, in other words, your actions or behaviors, and then the results that you get. But what sits below that is really, really important, and this is what really impacts and influences your decision making. If you go below the water and you go right down to the bottom of the iceberg, right down there at the bottom of the iceberg sits stuff that we refer to as values, beliefs, and principles. And yeah, there might be differences between the three things. I just want to talk today really about beliefs and maybe a little bit about values. Principles for me are those kind of aspects of how you understand life that you don't necessarily negotiate. Those things are ingrained and they're good. It keeps us all honest. It keeps us all on the straight and narrow, if you want. But values and beliefs can be changed rather easily. Okay, so I just want to illustrate to you that the values, beliefs, and principles is the stuff that sits right at the bottom of the iceberg. If you then move up a little bit, let's say 1/3 upwards into the iceberg, write the word in your mind's eye there that says thoughts, okay, or thinking, the thinking process. Then about another third up towards the waterline, write another word down there in your mind's eye. And that you name feelings or emotions, right? So what have we got now? We've got right at the bottom, we've got values, beliefs, and principles. Then above that, we've got thoughts or thinking. And then above that, we've got emotions or feelings. And then we hit the waterline. And that's where we make a decision or we make a choice. And then above the waterline, we see actions, what we do, and we see consequences. Now, draw arrows from the values, beliefs, and principles up to your thinking process, thoughts, and then up to the emotions, and then draw the other arrow right through to the waterline, which is, as I said, the moment of truth, if you want. That's where you make a decision. And then draw another arrow up above the waterline to what you do, your actions, right? And then another arrow upwards towards the results or the outcomes, right? But then what I want you to do is, in your mind's eye, draw an arrow from the results or the outcomes right up top, up above the waterline, above the tip of the iceberg, if you want. Take that arrow and draw a line right down to the bottom where you sit with your values, beliefs, and principles. Because decision making for us as individuals is a closed loop system, right? It's a closed loop system. So whatever you've got inside of you and however you make decisions, whenever you get results or outcomes, those results or outcomes will confirm or deny your values, beliefs, and principles. That's a fundamental tenet or a fundamental principle, I think, that is true for individual decision making. So how does individual decision making actually work? And I'm here talking about, guys, substantive decisions. Decisions like, for example, should I buy that car or not, firstly? And if I buy that car, which one should I be buying? Should or should I not be buying that new house? It's a significant decision, right? I'm not talking about the kind of, what kind of a sandwich are you going to have for lunch in the canteen? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about substantial decisions. Decisions about your career. Decisions about your family and your kids. Decisions about getting married or not, getting divorced or not, right? Moving house or not, changing jobs and so forth. Significant decisions. So how do we typically make those decisions? I've explained the process of decision making now. Now I want to just touch on two other things. And the first thing for me is, what are our needs as human beings? And again, you can go do your own search and check out the research. There's fundamentally, guys, 4 basic needs that we as human beings have got. And the best and the simplest and the easiest way to remember for me in terms of our human needs, if you want, was coined by Covey in one of his books. I think it was First Things First or something like that. I can't remember. He said something like this. He said, you need to live, you need to love, you need to learn, and you need to leave a legacy. And therein lies the 4 basic needs of any human being. Living, loving, learning, and leaving a legacy. Right. Think about those things quick. Living part, that's the aspects regarding the body. Okay, so you need rest, you need sleep, you need proper nutrition, right? You need breath, air, right? You need all the things that's got to do with your body. That's the living part. He says you need to live, you need to love, and that is confirming or fundamental to the fact that we are not hermits, we are social animals, right? We need to relate to others. So the loving part has got to do with that. So you need to relate to others and you need to be in communion with other human beings. Living, loving, learning. That's all about the mind, guys. And that's all about growth, if you want. So you need to live, you need to love, you need to learn. So you need to develop stuff, learn, grow in terms of your mind and so forth. And then the 4th need is leaving a legacy. And the question there is, what will be different on this earth because you happen to spend a couple of short years over here? That's really the 4th question. So there's the 4 needs: living, loving, learning, leaving a legacy. That last one is like a spiritual need, if you want. It's about a legacy need, if you want. It's what you leave behind and what will be different because you were here. So those are the 4 human needs, right? Now, I've spoken about the process. I've spoken about the needs. Now, the 3rd thing I want to touch on is the notion of the pain-pleasure principle. Now, how this works in the brain and so forth, I'll explain in a follow-up video. But suffice to say right now, when I said at the bottom of that iceberg, there's values, beliefs, and principles, those beliefs of yours, right? Actually, you have two sets of beliefs, right? You've got a set of beliefs that links to pain, and you've got a set of beliefs that links to pleasure, right? The pain-pleasure principle physiologically kicks in when you have to make a choice or a decision, right? So going to understand your beliefs, doing the work to go and understand your beliefs about specifically controversial issues, but specifically also about the general aspects of life is really, really something that'll be worth your while. But you've got two sets of beliefs. One is called the moving towards beliefs, and one is called the moving away from beliefs. And obviously, the moving towards beliefs are those things that give you pleasure, that cause you pleasure, right? And the moving away from beliefs are the things that cause you pain, right? Now, the moving towards beliefs would be things like honesty, integrity, family, togetherness, things like that, right? So those are positive, upbuilding, wonderful beliefs that cause you pleasure when you experience decisions and actions and consequences based on those beliefs. The other beliefs, the moving away from beliefs, those cause the pain in your life. Those could be disappointment, failure, right? Failure both professionally and personally, from your perspective, of course. So those are the beliefs that typically will cause you pain in your life. So understand that there's also two sets of beliefs that actually drive your process of decision making. So why am I sharing all of this with you? Because that pain-pleasure principle is fundamentally important. You will tend to move towards those things that give you pleasure, and you would tend to move away from those things that cause you pain. Included in that list of painful beliefs, or beliefs and values that could cause you pain, are things like confrontation and dishonesty and disappointment and all sorts of things like that, right? So those are the values, beliefs, and principles. That's the process, the pain-pleasure principle, if you want, and the 4 human needs. So how does this whole thing work when you put it all together? When you are confronted with a decision to be made, right? You've got this thing in your brain that is referred to as the RAS, the Reticular Activating System. Now, the Reticular Activating System, just for illustrative purposes, you can think of almost as a filter or a matrix. In other words, that's the thing that determines what data and what information gets through your filter, if you want, into your system, into your brain, for interpretation and for use. Right. So you've all probably seen the gorilla video where the gorilla walks across the stage. But if I said to you, just in the room where you're sitting, wherever you're sitting, just have a look around and see and identify things in your room that are red in color. Right? Just take a moment and have a look at things that are red in color. And if I now asked you to just close your eyes and tell me, what did you notice in that room that was blue? Okay. And if you just do that little exercise with yourself, I think you'll get the message. I asked you to look for things that are red. When you closed your eyes, I asked you to just identify for me, what are the things that you saw that were blue, right? Now, look around the room and see, what do you see in this room that's actually blue? And all of a sudden, now I can see a whole bunch of things in my room that's actually blue. All I'm trying to illustrate by that is that you've got that RAS, Reticular Activating System, that's the filter, right? Almost like a matrix that allows certain bits and pieces of data to come through or not. Now, that RAS, that filter, is linked to your values, beliefs, and principles. Okay, so you will see the world and you will therefore allow in data into your system based on your view of the world. Right, now, where that view of your world comes from is from childhood, right? From 0 to about 7, we get programmed, if you want, in terms of how to live a good life, how to be a functional human being, things like that. So you learn from your parents, your primary caretakers, your family, your old folks maybe, granny and grandpa, maybe even from religious people, from later on in life, from people that teach you, in other words, teachers and things like that. So that's where you learn, and then you have certain experiences, and based on that, you build up this thing, okay? This frame of reference, if you want, almost the model of life that is true for you, right? If somebody asked you something like, do you agree with canned lion hunting or not? Is it good? Is it bad? Do you agree with and support the death penalty, for that matter? Is it good? Is it bad? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? So your upbringing, your experiences, your childhood, your connection with all sorts of other figures of authority and principle in your life will help you determine that RAS. And that RAS is really informed by your values, beliefs, and principles. So how does the process of decision making then take place? You have your RAS, you observe in the world, and you let through the relevant data as per your frame of reference or your model of the world, your RAS, your values, beliefs, and principles. And based on that, right, you go through that process that I explained. So from having filtered the data, now sitting with the data to inform your decision, right, you go through a rational process. Typically takes place in the prefrontal cortex, right? That's the thinking process, your thoughts, okay? Then after that, you will go through an emotional process, a feelings process, right? Again, informed by all the chemicals in your brain and so forth. So you go through an emotional process. So there's a reference in terms of values, beliefs, and principles. You think through things, right? You might even use a piece of paper and a pen and scratch down pros and cons of a specific decision, right? That's the rational part, the thinking part. And then you go through the feeling part or the emotional part, and then you hit that waterline, right? And then you make a decision. And based on that, you do something. You go into action, okay? And then the result of that is an outcome or a consequence of some sort. Remember what I said before? It's a closed loop system. So whatever outcome or consequence you get, whatever result you get, there's an arrow that goes back to the values, beliefs, and principles, right? And you will confirm or deny those principles, values, and beliefs every single time you live through a consequence or a result of your decision making. Right. Let me give you an example. If you believe that in your lifetime you get married once, this is a fairy tale, it's going to last until one of us die, then that's your values, beliefs, and principles now talking to you, right? If you're one of those unlucky guys that one Monday morning or one Monday night rocks up at home and you find your wife and your kids are gone and you don't understand why, okay, there's probably some reason why. But anyways, if you realize that that marriage then breaks up, okay, that's a consequence or an outcome or a result. Remember, something you experience. Remember the feedback loop, that little arrow that goes back to the values, beliefs, and principles. Your values, beliefs, and principles about marriage being a one-time in-life event and it lasting forever, for example, will now be challenged. Okay, so you will now start believing something different in terms of relationships. What could that lead to? That could lead to you, for example, never allowing yourself to love again, never trusting people that you would have easily gotten into a relationship before in your life after that incident. So you can see that that fundamentally could be impacting your entire life, and that's the power of beliefs. So that's how choice works, guys. That's how decisions work on an individual level. All right. 3 things to remember again. There's the process of decision making. There's the whole issue of the 4 basic human needs, right? To live, to love, to learn, to leave a legacy. And then there's the whole notion or the theme of pain, pleasure, right? Moving towards and moving away from values, beliefs, and principles. Okay, so that's how individual decision making works. Now, what is different between that process of decision making and the process of decision making within a group of people? Let's say you are now sitting in a team meeting or in a boardroom, on a client presentation meeting, or any other gathering where there's more than one of us in the room. Remember now, each one of us has got an iceberg model. Each one of us has got a reference in terms of values, beliefs, and principles, right? So if you now put 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 people into the room, remember, you got like 15 or 20 of those icebergs floating around the sea now. And now you are going to try to orchestrate all of those people in the room to actually make not the right or wrong decision, I don't like referring to that, but the most optimal decision possible in that situation. Right, now there's a couple of things that we need to be aware of when we talk group decision making, right? 3 things I just want to reference and just want to refer to. The first thing is conformity within a group like that. And there's experiments that was done by Solomon Asch in the 60s. That's called Asch's conformity principles, right? Where essentially he went and researched the way that we as individuals within a group will conform to others for whatever reason. Okay. Conformity in a group. In other words, when your eyes literally tell you that you are making the wrong decision, but because your boss next to you, for example, and your senior colleague sitting on the other side of you in a boardroom thinks differently about the decision that you need to make, you may well decide to conform. And I think, if I remember the stats correctly, 38% of people in group settings like that will very easily conform because of that kind of a setup within a group. So now you're trying to make a decision. Let's say you need to spend a lot of money on a software suite or a transformational project, or the building or not of a new head office for your business or your organization, and you're going to make that decision within a group. Can you see that that can get quite a messy and a complex process? And that's just conformity that takes place within groups, right? That's the first thing. Then there's another thing that we call groupthink. That's another phenomenon that takes place within groups where decision making is at hand. Groupthink essentially, guys, is when our thinking, and therefore also our decision making process, gets influenced by the group itself in the way we think. We almost, as a group of people, the fact that we are together as a group of people becomes more important than the initial purpose of why the group was even started or created. That is effectively what groupthink is all about. All it means is that you can be, again, influenced by the context and the other individuals in that group. That's the power of groupthink. There's those two things, conformity and groupthink. The third thing is the so-called Abilene paradox. And this is something that was illustrated so well in the decisions that were made, for example, when the Challenger disaster took place in 1989, when the a disaster that took place about 2 or 3 years after that, I think it was called Columbia, when that took place, the decision making that led up to the launch of those fateful missions, all three of those aspects, conformity, groupthink, and the so-called Abilene paradox, was identified in those group decision making processes. So what's the Abilene paradox? The Abilene paradox, the simplest way to understand that is, when I'm in a group, I behave in a way that I think you want me to behave in that group. Now think about this. If your boss is in the room, right? If your senior colleagues are in the room, if your subordinates are in the room, do you think that there's a slight possibility that you could be on your way to Abilene, which is, by the way, a little small town in Texas in the USA? But do you think that it's possible that you could actually be practicing the Abilene paradox if you're not aware of this and not careful of this, that you could potentially be behaving in such a way that you think this is the way that my boss would want me to behave in? Okay. Pull that back to decision making, and you can clearly see that there could be a potential risk that you could be supporting the wrong decision in a group setting like that. Right. I've been in enough boardrooms, team meetings, operational meetings, you name it, where decisions had to be made. Sometimes we have to make significant, impactful decisions about the future of an organization or a department or a division within that business. And I've lived through this firsthand. That's the way this works, guys. So we've spoken about individual decision making. We've touched on group decision making processes. We've spoken about those three things that impact us. Remember, apart from the individual decision making process that's going on between the head and the heart of each one of us in the room, there's those three aspects, right? Got the conformity issue, the groupthink issue, and the Abilene paradox that plays itself out within a group setting. So those are all issues that you need to just simply take note of and be aware of as you go through life and as you make decisions. Remember, choice or decisions determine your future, determines where you go, determines whether you turn, literally, guys, as basic as left or right, right? And that essentially determines the destiny of your life. Okay, I've made some serious decisions, right? Critical decisions way back in my life. And if I look at a timeline of my life, if you want, I can see how the decisions I made had impacted or influenced the direction of my life, the choices I've made, the consequences I have lived through. Okay, just a couple of examples. I, for example, chose to not study in the USA, but to come back to South Africa to study in South Africa once I had completed my high school education. That was a fundamental decision I made, which determined the direction of my life and probably the destiny or the fate of my life. Okay. The fact that I had been in two primary relationships, the first one ended in divorce. I made a decision to get married, and then eventually, after how many years, to get divorced. That had a fundamental impact on the direction of my life and therefore my fate and my destiny. Same with my second marriage. I made a choice to get married again. I made a choice to be vulnerable, to take a chance and to love again and to be exposed to probably being hurt or disappointed again. But there's a whole bunch of other positive, wonderful things that comes with that kind of a decision. So I made that decision and I got married, and I'm still happily married. It's now been like almost 25 years. So that's just illustrative of how these fundamental decisions that you make can actually impact not only the direction of your life, but also the eventual midterm to long-term outcome, and also therefore then, guys, the destiny that you will be upon in life. So I hope that helps a little bit. The very first step in terms of all of these things, in terms of how your decision-making processes work, and specifically in the work environment, in the corporate environment, in the business environment, in terms of how those decision-making processes work. And please believe me, by the way, there isn't an awful lot of people out there that understand, first of all, individual decision-making, and damn well not group decision-making, right? I sit in corporate boardrooms way too often, and I look around the room and I see how decisions are made within group settings, and I just realize those three things I shared with you, how those things impact decision-making within corporate settings. And it's scary, guys, sometimes to see how that negatively impacts decision-making in group settings. And that then determines the trajectory, the direction of an organization. And sometimes that direction then is down the hill, not up the hill, or not down the, the wide, kind of beaten path, if you want. So I hope that helps a little bit. The very first step, as I said, is you need to develop a level of awareness. So just go and understand that process of individual decision making. Think through the things that I shared with you in terms of group decision making, and then just become aware when you have to make substantial, impactful decisions in your life. Just become aware of the process that you are following. Try to make sense out of, for example, your thinking process, the references that you use in terms of values, beliefs, and principles, right? And your emotive process. And then when you get to the waterline and you make a choice and you do things, just think through those things. And you'll soon enough start realizing that once you become aware of it, you also have a need or a want to better understand that, and you will be on the journey to get a better handle on how decision making works and how it works specifically within group settings in a corporate environment as well. I hope that helps a little bit. If you get good at understanding how decision making and decision making processes work, both in an individual and in a group setting, I promise you, you will be differentiating yourself. You will be starting to play in a different league when it comes to success and so forth, and impact, if you want, in the corporate environment and in life in general out there. Hope you enjoyed. We will chat about change in the next video.